All right, I call the Transportation Committee for May 9th to order. Let the record reflect that Deputy Mayor Steinmetz is not available on an excused absence. And with that, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the March 14th meeting?
So moved.
And I second. That would be approve it. So then we're going to go to the draft improvement plan, and I turn it over to you, Tom.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I will run through the transportation improvement plan. This is a very similar layout to what you've probably seen for the past 4 or 5 years now on this. And this year, I would say we don't have too many changes. So I will kind of run through the background, why it's important, proposed changes, and I'll go through I'll do a quick overview, kind of project by project. Probably won't hit all of them, but we'll go through the TIP as well, and then we'll get on to next steps. So with that, the background, what is the TIP and how are projects identified? So this is a prioritized list of 89 projects within the city that are not financially constrained. So we do not have, basically if you look at the budget or the expenditure schedule for these projects, it's kind of just an estimate at this point. This is how we develop our CIP projects, and at that point, then that's when we kind of come up with the budgeting for those projects. So this list is derived from the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, which is a long-range plan looking at 20 years or so with the goals, policies, and guiding the existing and future transportation systems. It defines the manageable network of arterial roadways, pedestrian, bicycle, and transportation networks, all supporting the city. So projects that are included within the TIP, they're based on the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, engineering studies, a lot of community input that we receive throughout the year, and other interagency collaborations. So that last one, that would be like if we have a utility, a franchise utility who comes to us and says, hey, we're doing work in this location, city, would you like to partner? And we'd look at partnering with them to incorporate some of our needs in, typically that would be under an interlocal agreement to look at some of our needs and do that in collaboration with their project. So why is the TIP important? It provides direction to staff for, like I said, the development of the 6-year capital improvement plan. Also for interagency planning and coordination, kind of like I said with our utilities. It's required annually by state law, and we report that to both WashDOT and PSRC. It also kind of positions projects for future grants and loans. Many times when we apply for a grant, it is required that the project that we're submitting be part of the city's TIP. So with that, I'll jump into the proposed TIP changes. That's a typo there for the years. Should be 2025 through 2024. So this year, the only change that I've proposed so far is priority 43, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, doing an update to that. So I would suggest reprioritizing that to priority 16. As an update to the plan is sorely needed within the next couple of years. Our current Comprehensive Transportation Plan, the last major update we did to that was back in 2009, and we did a very small update back in 2015. And so this kind of brings it up in the priorities so that we can start looking at it for budgeting and finding out where we can come up with the money to do that plan. Because I threw in a number just preliminary of $500,000, and so it's a substantial expenditure.
That was going to be my question, is where'd you come up with that number? So because obviously that seems like when we'll be doing a lot of this in-house, that is it allocating hours and labor that?
So typically this is done by a consultant.
Oh, it's done by a consultant, okay.
Yeah. And so we've had some kind of preliminary discussions with consultants, and we've just kind of tossed around that 500,000 number. It's really just a starting point to get an idea of what this may cost.
No, I understand why you want to move it up in priority, so I don't have an issue with that. I'm going to email you at a later date, something I think should come on to the TIP, but obviously the priority will probably be down the road. But the short answer is it has something to do with Fourth Avenue South up on North Hill.
Okay.
But other than that, I mean, the list has been the same. You guys work on it. They're obtainable. Obviously, if something further down the list suddenly gets funding, you move it up. It doesn't necessarily mean 1's 1 and 16 is 16. You know, any of those can interchange, so I don't have any issue with it. This is my 7th year looking at it, and it didn't seem anything significant. The one I'll call out that I've heard from the residents, and I understand it's a partnership with Ken, and I even believe it might be WashDOT, is the 24th to 99 section of Kent Des Moines Highway. So, you know, it's gonna require a lot. There's conversation, because we're doing 24th. So obviously there's a lot to that, but I could see that maybe getting some focus. And I also understand a lot of that highway, as 509 comes in, we'll be working with the state on probably some things, and that could be done then. But that was the only one that, it's on there. So I don't think it needs to be moved up in priority. I just see it maybe possibly becoming more important later, just from some recent call-outs.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And I can I'll briefly run through these projects. I won't hit all of them, but I'll kind of just say, I mean, the top 15, I would say, is what we're really actively working on. Active projects and just active, like, annual projects that we have. So, like, pavement preservation program, we've got our annual overlay project that will go this summer.
Can I back up one?
Go ahead.
With regard to what the Councilmember Mahoney was saying is, with regard to the stretch between 24th and Pack Highway, how is that going to be affected when there's the redesignation of 509? Will the state then no longer be participating in any improvements there, and it's all going to come on us, or?
So, could you clarify exactly where again?
Well, between 24th and Pack Highway.
I actually
Yeah.
have a little bit of an answer to that, because Dan Brewer and I discussed it in great detail for a few years. It's a process. Once 509's open, there'll be a process where that will be handed over to the city, but they have to transfer it over at a certain level. So a lot of the work and requests may come on that highway prior to them handing over, but it'll probably be several years before that'll happen, because they'll need to get the financing and go through the process. That's the way I understood it.
Yeah, that's kind of my understanding as well. I haven't been part of those conversations, but that's basically what I've heard as well.
The idea was to have them give us a new road when they're gonna hand it over, so because they're responsible for the maintenance and upkeep.
Right.
One of the recent fish passage and so forth was part of that initial work.
Yep.
But that's where, like I said, like he was talking about, the 99 to 24 section, part of that borders Kent, and then it's a state highway, so there's gonna be at least 3 players in the games. That makes it a lot more complicated.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so a couple annual programs: traffic safety improvement program, ADA compliance, 24th Avenue. Obviously, we're under construction right now with that one. We've got both Sound Transit, which we're nearing the end of that one. So that one I could see potentially coming off that next year. We've got WashDOT 509, which kind of continues with both phase 1 and phase 2. The Barnes Creek Trail, actively working on that, as well as that's kind of tied in together with the South 240th improvements, working on design of that right now. Guardrail program is an annual program we have, and then another project that we're working on in design right now is, it's kind of known as the North Hill project, but this is the 200th and 199th improvements from Des Moines Memorial Drive to 8th Avenue.
Yeah, and that was the one you got the Safe Routes to School grant, right?
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
So kind of looking at, so some of these next projects here are ones that I anticipate we'll probably be submitting some grant applications for in the near future. So kind of the next segment of 24th to the north of where we're currently working. So that's between 216th and 223rd. So that's kind of teed up as kind of looking at kind of what's next. Same with 240th from 16th to Marine View Drive. That's always kind of one that we keep kind of higher up to look at for grant opportunities as well. 13, we've got College Way, which is almost completed. Just kind of trying to tie up a couple loose ends on that one. And then these next few here, I wouldn't say that we're actively working on these, but they're a higher priority project. Marine View Drive and 240th, 223rd and Cliff Avenue, as well as the east end of 240th. We've got the 224th improvements. That one, we do have some funding available for that, and I would like to see that happen in the next few years. So that's one that we're kind of actively pursuing. We've got the Redondo Area Parking Management Program as number 18. Another Redondo project, the Redondo Area Streetlights, is 19.
So really quick on that one, is there any way, since the fishing pier is having its issue, that might be moved up? Because you're going to be doing, I think they're going to be doing some infrastructure for the gates when they do the restroom. I guess put it on your radar, because right now it's 2027, but it seems like if we can, the budget right there, is it possible to include it? I'm just saying we might save money that way while we work the delays on the others.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that a little bit. The Redondo Area Parking Management Project, I know it shows some 300,000 worth of improvements. I do not believe, I'd have to check, but I don't believe that's currently funded.
I think the parking piece is funded. It was funded in the bond.
I'd have to check into
Yeah,
that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't think it's, maybe it's, I guess I'll back up. I don't think it's in the transportation TIP. I think I'd have to,
Yeah,
CIP,
yeah.
I'd have to check the municipal.
Yeah,
CIP.
I don't think it's in the, it's not in the TIP. It's
That's
just,
right.
I have to call it out because of the fact that if we're gonna, well, we'll probably have about a third of it torn up anyways, or at least do the line for these then, and then continue the process. It just seems like you open the trench once.
So these, though, are more within the right-of-way, not necessarily in the park.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was, because I know they gotta go out to the right of way.
Yep.
And I was thinking that might be an opportunity to at least get some of it done.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something we can check into.
Okay.
Okay, the rest of these, I would say, just gonna run through these real quick, but I don't think, really none of the rest of these are projects that we're actively working on. It's just kind of a wish list looking at the future. So I'm not gonna run through every one of them unless there's any projects that you'd like me to highlight.
Like we were saying, that they're there, if the money does come available, they move up in priority.
Right.
But they're here, so availability to get grants and so forth is, crucial. So I think it's good and a very comprehensive list. And I don't have an issue, like I said, with the one change you're making. Usually there's 5 or 6, so.
Yeah, yeah, it's a quiet year for this compared to some of the last ones. Okay.
Councilman Roxer, did you have any comments before?
Not on this, so.
Okay.
Okay. So kind of the next steps I see on this, we'll bring this back as a final version to the committee in June. And then I'm anticipating taking this to the full council for a public hearing that same night on June 13th.
Okay. I'm not sure, you want to bring it again before committee. I'm not sure we even need to do that.
Okay.
Because you're making one change, and I think you're okay with that being coming before council. I mean, unless something changes, then we can. So, I mean, obviously, we don't have our next meeting that we'd handle any business would be that June, I think 9th date, right?
I think it's June 13th.
June 13th, okay. So I don't see any reason why,
Okay.
save yourself the hassle. unless something significant happens.
Yeah, and so it'll be out as, for a public hearing, so there will be, if there are any public comments, we'd receive them at that time and we can address that. And we can even just address it, like you said, during the public hearing at council.
Sounds good. All right.
Yep.
So you want to move on to the public works contracts?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so public works contracting. So historically, we have not been required to include apprentice utilization requirements on our public works contracts. That will change as of the end of June this year. We'll be required basically on any project where we estimate it to be $2 million or more. As part of the specs for that project, we'll require 15% or more of the total labor hours to be by apprentices. And so this, and it'll change in the future as well. In July of 2026, any project basically over 1.5 million will have to follow those regulations. And then again in 2028, any projects over 1 million will also be included. So I guess we'll kind of have to stay tuned to see how this plays out. But just in general, I think that it's possible that we could see projects just becoming a little bit more expensive because of these requirements.
Yeah, I mean, well, prevailing wage jobs, and then of course, this, I know a lot of the unions fought hard for this to get some relevant experience for their folks, but yeah, I understand the cost. So, and it's a new requirement, so it's not like we can discount it or anything, so.
Right.
I know you guys will do your best.
So that's really all I have as an update for that. We haven't, just staff resources have not had a chance to really dive into it, but we'll include it within our projects where we estimate it to be over $2 million, and we'll see where we land on it.
Okay. Did you have any comments on this one, Councilman Rox?
No, but this is while we've got Tom here, I would be remiss in not asking what is the update on 24th, the 24th project?
Yeah, so that is currently under delay due to, basically we're waiting on utilities to relocate their facilities. And so we've been reaching out, I would say on a daily basis, to some of the communication utilities who still have their lines on the old PSE poles. And so the hope is, and we've been pretty stern with them lately, requiring them to move their facilities by the end of this month. And so our hope is to have our contractor start up work immediately after that, around June 1st. I think Lumen and Comcast, those are the two utilities that are actively working out there currently to move their lines onto the new PSE poles on the west side of 24th.
But the only issue would be if you can't complete our work before the paving window. The paving, obviously there'd be something temporary, but the permanent paving couldn't happen until it warms up again.
Yeah, so I think the thought would be we'd at least be able to get down the first lift of new asphalt. And so the final 2 inches, that could be delayed till next spring. But you'd still have, regardless of that, you'd still have a new paving on basically on the roadway. So it'd be substantially different than it is currently.
So at this point, there's no, I have to admit, I have not driven through there in the last week. Do we still have the pothole problem, or is it?
It's rough, yeah, it's definitely rough, and so our crews are actually maintaining that currently, because we have the contractor, basically they are suspended from the project, and we can ask that they come back and do work on potholes or any other issues that may be out there, but it's gonna cost us. And so it's been cheaper to have our crews go out there and do kind of maintain that asphalt as best as we can, really. There's only so much that we can do at this point.
Okay, particularly at the intersection of,
226th.
no, I think it's not 220, I think it's 227th place. It's where it goes into,
Yeah,
there's some pretty serious potholes there.
right.
I drove the day before yesterday, and they'd done some
They have done so.
patching there. But it's the wear and tear of multiple cars that's gonna continue to be a battle till
Yep.
we can get the paving done.
Yep, it will be.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Moving on to the comprehensive plan update. We may just sit here the whole time for just this.
I know. This isn't even my area of expertise, just kidding. Good evening, committee members. So tonight there's gonna be some of these slides you've seen before, but this PowerPoint is providing the public who might be listening in or looking at information, some of the background for our comp plan update, and so it'll go on our comp plan website as well. So as you know, we've got a 2044 growth targets for both jobs and housing, and we've been taking the comprehensive plan elements to the different committees. So tonight we are focusing on the transportation element. And so the statewide goals and the GMA are really looking at encouraging multimodal transportation systems that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled. There's also requirements, they call it concurrency requirements, to ensure that the facilities and services are in place when at the time of development. And then, of course, climate change and resiliency are another aspect that we need to plan for. And that includes, like I mentioned, reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, as well as resiliency to climate change, and then also advancing environmental justice. So as you all know, the statewide priorities are focused on adding housing in urban areas. And so these are things we're currently working on, middle housing and ADUs, as well as there's going to be new requirements to address climate change. And so in particular, the middle housing and the ADU pieces could significantly influence or impact our transportation systems, depending on the outcomes of that work. So the land use element is sort of the driver of the comp plan. It sets, where you're going to take your growth and how that's going to be distributed throughout the city. And then from there, we dive down and look at what the infrastructure currently that exists and what the needs are. To date, we have been really focusing, we're designated as a transit community, a high-capacity transit community. So over the past years, we've been focusing growth around transit hubs and BRT hubs and that. And so the middle housing is one that is sort of deviates from that approach, because you're pretty much spreading that growth out throughout the community. And so that will be something that we will be looking at. Tommy did a really good job of providing you an overview of what the comprehensive transportation plan is looking at. And this is basically taking that information and it's just synthesizing it down into the comprehensive plan. So a lot of the meat of that, of what we put in the comp plan, comes from the comprehensive transportation plan. And as Tommy indicated, we had done a minor update to the comprehensive transportation plan back in 2015, and that was mostly to facilitate our ability to update the transportation element. And so this is just an overview of the things that we are going to need to consider. Obviously, we have an existing transportation element, and so it's really looking at what has changed since our last comp plan update, and then also needing to go back in and do some additional modeling. And so as part of this effort, we are going to have, try and get some consultant support for this. And so the company that helped us the last time and that did the modeling for the comprehensive transportation plan, Fair & Peers they work with AHBL all the time, so we'll be able to add them as a subconsultant to our AHBL contract. And so the big focal areas are multimodal transportation facilities, levels of service. There is a new requirement, and this is where it's outside of my area of expertise more, but the transition plans that are required as part of ADA are American with Disabilities Act requirements. And so those are the things that our consultant will be looking at. And then again, the interrelatedness of not just the internal consistency of the transportation element with other elements of the comprehensive plan, but also how does it comply with Vision 2050, our countywide planning policies, as well as the Growth Management Act. And in your packet, just more as background, our consultants went through the Department of Commerce checklist that talks about what has changed in state law and what we need to do to update our transportation element. And so our consultants will be looking at that as well and potentially making recommended policy changes, or some of the recommendations may feed into the work that Tommy was just talking about for updating the comprehensive transportation plan. And then this just shows the interrelationship of all the transportation components, and you have your road, street systems, transit systems, freight mobility. We've done a lot to address freight mobility on the 24th, 28th connection to SeaTac Airport. That's an example. Concurrency management systems, and that's making sure systems are in place at the time of development. And so in some situations that could affect your transportation improvement program where you need to have roadway improvements to address levels of service. In many cases, at least in the city of Des Moines, it is typically when a development comes in, they are making transportation improvements as part of their development to address things like levels of service. So it may trigger the growth from a project, may trigger the need to signalize an intersection, or there may be other aspects that need to be adjusted. But often you might have a section of roadway, I could see like in the downtown area, where we don't have sidewalks in certain areas, and so if a development was coming in, they would be providing curb gutter sidewalk, that kind of thing. And access management. And then this last slide, or it's not, almost the last slide, is really just looking at the interrelationship of the current systems, how we're looking at forecast growth, demand, levels of service, looking at your maintenance and deficiencies in your system, and then also the financing component, which is your transportation improvement program. And so our consultants will also be looking at that and making recommendations. And then lastly, we are going to be working to get a consultant on board to start doing a model update. And we haven't really gotten into the details, but I'm anticipating it would be, you know, plugging in the new growth targets, and that I see that there may be a need for adjustment down the road once we get through our middle housing piece and that, but it will give us enough to where we could meet the state requirements for our transportation element update. And so we have the next, I guess, once we have a consultant on board, and any recommendations that come out of their work would come to this committee first. And then we would be able to address any questions, but we would definitely, if you have any kind of questions tonight, we can make sure we pass that on to the consultants. And then this last bulleted list are just the elements that we have remaining to take through council committees. So we have capital facilities, utilities, and public services elements that are gonna be going to economic development and potentially municipal facilities later in June. Parks, recreation, and open space, that one is just taking what was already adopted in the parks plan, and Healthy Des Moines is a pretty small one as well. And then after that, just any updates that we feel are necessary to take to the committee. Otherwise, it would be, we would package it all together for the draft document for public review and SEPA review. The housing element is probably gonna be a big driver on this as well, and so that will be coming in June, July timeframe. And that is all I have, unless you have questions or inputs.
Yeah, I actually have a couple. So in the plan or with the consultant, both Councilman Oxer and I bring this up all the time. We have 3 light rail stations that essentially bookend our city. They're on the borders, they're not in our city. But the last mile, obviously 635 covers a portion of town, but could expand north in the central to the High Line, the Kent Des Moines station there, and then of course up the way off 272nd where that station's gonna be. So we're obviously gonna need Metro as a partner in that. So obviously that gets identified along with the potential it mentioned for, there's some of us that still believe in the passenger ferry stuff, and there's great opportunity with electrification and funding through the climate dollars. So I'd like to see if that can be considered. Charging stations, whatever's there, and then of course parking is always an issue. So like with this middle housing and ADUs, obviously there's gonna have to be some considerations for parking, along with additionally downtown in particular with the parking as well. So as far as transportation, I could see those being instrumental in part of the discussion, at least pertaining to the transportation piece that I have. And you may already have some of that already. I just know those are the hot buttons that we need help with. Councilman Roxger, or
Yeah, so one thing to add, as it pertains to the last mile discussion. So, currently, and I think you'll likely see it on our social media channels here shortly, but there is currently a survey, with Metro right now, looking at kind of all of South King County. And so I would suggest taking a look at that survey. And yeah, you'll see more details on that, hopefully coming out here shortly.
I'll keep working over Metro on skateboard and PSRC Transportation Policy Board as well. Councilman Roxer.
Just one question. Are we still maintaining, what is the date now that we're expecting the Federal Light Rink line to be on schedule, on board?
2026, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah, I know it's squishy. I know it's squishy. I wish they just opened the Kent Des Moines station sooner than the rest, but they're kind of hell-bent on all 3 at the same time.
So the question is, regarding that, is then how much lead time do we need with regard to doing a last mile survey so that it can be concurrent with the opening of the line, or are we not going for concurrency there?
Well, so the survey that's out right now, and I have not had a chance to look at it yet, but I think that they're taking into account the future light rail stations. And yeah, that's the best I can give you at this point.
Can you send that survey to the council?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
So, but we don't have any idea how long we expect it to take in order to develop the last mile plan?
I'm not sure.
Okay, and is there any reason why we can't be developing? We know where the light rail is gonna go. It's primarily a question of, you know, when it's gonna get done, but
Right, and so, I mean, we always, I mean, we can suggest that to Metro, but ultimately, it's Metro's, call on that. And I mean, we can be fully supportive of the last mile, but in the end, it's their decision where they decide to run those lines.
so have we had any discussion with them as to how they're proceeding, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, we
Are
take
they
every-
sliding because the light rail's sliding?
I'm not sure. I think any discussion that we have with Metro, we're always bringing that up. I had a discussion with Metro a week or so ago where I brought up the last mile, and so it kind of what they kind of steered me toward was, hey, talk to your community about the survey, and we'll take into account what those survey results are as we look towards what the future holds.
I mean, before to get the 635 route, we had to fund it. We used ARPA dollars and so forth to get it started, and then we proved it worthy, and then they took over funding.
Right.
You know, obviously, I'm hoping this time they'll fund it outright, but yeah, so we'll do our best. There's a few people that get out on social media that can tell everybody to do the survey.
Thank you.
Anything else, Councilman Roxer? Okay. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? All right, we adjourn. Thank you, guys. Strong work, especially for as well-staffed as you are, and I say that sarcastically.